Hello everybody and welcome back to the Golf Guru Show. My name is Jason Sutton, aka The Guru, where it is my job to dissect, analyze, break down, and ultimately share with all of you the habits, routines, and life lessons of high performers in the golf industry, as well as all other fields in between. On today's episode, I have my good friend Brandon Roby. Brandon is one of the top teachers in the Michigan area, and he is the director of instruction at Cascade Hills Country Club. And I'm very excited to have him on the show as we discuss many topics in this wide-ranging conversation, which included Brandon's path of success and his journey to becoming the director of instruction at a very prominent country club. We also talk about the importance of finding a good mentor, and he lays out a framework of steps of how to find that mentor and to really take advantage of that individual that's willing to help you get to the next level. We also discuss the state of our instruction business and really what he feels like is holding all of us coaches back, and some really sage advice for the young coaches out there and the PGMers that I think you're going to really enjoy. So without further ado, let's get to my conversation with Brandon Roby. Enjoy. All right, Brandon, welcome to the show. Thanks so much for coming on, man.
Oh, I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day and inviting me on. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. So we've been friends for quite a while, and I'm sure we'll get into how we met in our relationship. But for the two people out there that don't know who Brandon Roby is, let's kind of take them back through your career and maybe even start earlier than that, and just kind of let everybody know how you got to where you are as the director of instruction at Cascade Hills. And I think it'll be real helpful for the young coaches to hear sort of the journey and give them some lineage of your career.
Sure. It's one of those things where you listen to other people on podcasts and things like that, but my story is a little bit different than the rest. I actually got into golf very late in my career. I didn't actually start playing until I was a freshman in high school. I played multiple sports beyond that, pretty much everything. And then when I became a freshman, I just wasn't growing very fast. So it kind of felt like I was just kind of stagnant. And my dad and my brother and cousins and uncles, they all played golf. And my dad just said to me one day, and he goes, I just have a feeling that you're going to get hurt. Would you be interested in playing golf? I'm like, no. And he goes, why don't you just come out and play? And so, the typical first time, I didn't know what I was doing. I just went out there and I borrowed golf clubs. And I just remember I was on a hole. And I said to my dad, I go, well, what club do I hit? And he goes, just grab one, pick something and try it. And I grabbed a 3-wood, and I didn't know what holes were and all that kind of stuff. I'm just playing. And I remember me hitting that golf ball right in the center of the face, and that ball took off. And I'm like, wow, that was kind of cool. And so I started playing a little bit, and then I got hooked up with a friend of mine who was looking for some help on the local golf course, and I started working maintenance, and we played golf every day. And it just kind of grew from there as far as just me playing, experimenting with some stuff. Really never took a lot of formal lessons as I grew up until I got a little bit later when I was a junior and senior. And I was number one on the golf team, and I just learned how to play. Just most of the stuff, like with my brothers and my cousins, we just went out there and we played. And then when I was in college, I was working retail at a local golf store, and I just loved all the aspects of it. From fixing golf clubs, a good friend of mine today taught me the trade of re-whipping and finishing golf clubs, and I really enjoyed it. And at that moment, college was something that was okay for me, but I really just didn't enjoy school. And I looked at I had a friend that was in the golf business, and he said, why don't you look at the PGA of America? And so I did, and went through the process, and met Dave Mosini, who was our chapter and section president at that time. And he said, hey, he goes, if you're interested in doing this, he goes, I got a guy that's looking for an assistant, and he's a local golf pro, is a very good teacher. and he was looking for some help, and I basically started working for him back in 2003 and 4. Basically.
So where was that? Where was that?
That was at Kent Country Club. So I worked for a gentleman by the name of Charlie Vanderberg, and his good friend was Mike Bender. And every year for the PGA show, he went a week prior to the golf show, and we spent every hour we possibly could watching Mike Bender give lessons. And that's when I really got indoctrinated to multiple people coming through and just having the opportunity to watch really one of the best teachers around give golf lessons. And it kind of struck a passion for me to go, man, I liked helping people in the retail side of it, but then helping people with their golf swings was really, really intriguing to me, and learning about the golf swing and how it kind of worked, and taking people from, not hitting a golf ball to hitting that first shot like I experienced when I was a junior.
So what would you say you loved about teaching the most? Would you describe that a little bit further, and then sort of how you transitioned into, I guess, being a full-time teacher? Because a lot of guys out there obviously are going the assistant route and then maybe have a passion to I just want to do the teaching thing. Give us a little feedback on that.
Yeah. So Charlie, back then, Charlie ran everything. So he was in charge of the shop. He was in charge of, carts, and he was kind of your typical head golf professional. The assistants kind of ran the shop and tournaments for him. And when I got kind of more in depth with the teaching, what I liked about it was, one, the learning part of it, learning about how the golf swing kind of worked. I'm a kind of a why guy. I always like to know why. It gets me in trouble even with my kids, because I'm like, why did you do that? So that was always my, why do things work? When I was a kid, I just kind of went out there and figured it out. But people, when they came to you, they can't figure out the why. So they need somebody's help. So that was always the fun part about that for me, was helping them find their why. And when I got into working with Charlie, we talked about the golf swing all the time. It was something that we'd come in for a lesson and say, hey, would you look at this? What did I do? And how can you do this? And just kind of putting the pieces of a puzzle together. And I worked for Charlie for almost 5 years, and then he went on to do his own thing, and I went on to Cascade Hills. They were looking for an assistant, and I thought it was a good opportunity for me to kind of move on and to try to do some different things at a different club. And they were looking for an assistant, and then I worked there for almost 6 years as an assistant golf professional, running tournaments and doing kind of multiple hats like typical golf professionals did. But my 7th year in, we got a new head professional, and we met at the PGA show, and he says, what do you want to do? And I said, I don't want to do this anymore. I want to teach. I have a passion for it. And at that time, I met a couple other top 100 instructors. I got hooked up with Mike Shannon over at Sea Island, and then Gail Peterson. And I went down to see Mike at Sea Island one year before the PGA show, and Mike didn't have a lot of lessons. And I said, hey, I kind of want to hang around. He goes, who would you recommend watching? He said, I'd watch Gail. So I went out there, and she was working with a gentleman by the name of Rashard Lee. He was a running back for the Baltimore Ravens. And he was ginormous. He had a 54-inch chest, and he was solid muscle. And I remember watching her give him a lesson, and it was so easy. The way she communicated, the way she just kind of put things together, and it was really kind of impressive. And she got done with the lesson, and she said, hey, do you want to go for lunch? I said, sure. And so we sat down for the next 6 hours, and we just kind of talked. And she said, what do you want to do? And I said, I kind of feel like I want to teach. And she says, hey, why don't I help you? And that was my first real thing into the mentorship. And
right.
She took me under her wing. She came up and did a ladies clinic for me my 2nd year at Cascade Hills. And we got done, and she goes, Brandon, she goes, I think that you have what it takes to be a really great and successful teacher. She goes, but you just need to do a couple things. And so she said, I need you to learn more. She goes, I need you to read, which I'm not a big reader. I hate reading, actually. But she challenged me to do more than just the same old every day. And I went to our head professional, Adrian. I said, this is what I want to do. And he says, okay. He said, let's figure out a way to do it. And then 2 years after that, I wrote a letter to our board of directors, and I said, this is what I want to do. And I became the director of instruction then, and I've been the director of instruction there for the past 7 years.
That's awesome. Yeah, and I think that's the way it happens a lot of times, is we sort of figure stuff out through talking to other people, or just, I guess, the self-awareness of, figuring out what you enjoy and what you're passionate about. And that kind of transitions me into the next question is, who have been some of your mentors or influences in your career and in your life in general? And then what have you learned from those individuals? And then we'll talk a little bit about your personal development side as well, which will sort of blend with this topic, I think. But we could probably do a whole show on this.
I was going to say, how much time do we have to talk about all the course of my life? Man, oh man. My first one is Gail. Mike was a good friend, but Gail was the one that actually showed me more of the other side of it. She actually brought me, I've only known her for a year, but she brought me to my first top 100 coaching and teaching summit in Orlando. And that's when I really got indoctrinated to who's the best and why they're the best. The thing that impressed me the most with all of them is that not one of them knew that they knew everything. They were always just scratching the surface, and they're always kind of willing to ask questions. Gail is probably one of the most influential because of the fact she could have a conversation with anybody, but she's not the smartest person in the room. And then that led me to, quite honestly, Twitter, right? Which is kind of a weird thing. But when you're teaching juniors and they're constantly on their phone and you ask them what are they doing, they said back then it was Twitter. And that was a way that I can get in touch with them, quite honestly. And I got onto Twitter and just following golf people. And one of the people that actually reached out to me was Golf Pro Rod McGill. And
mutual friend. And we just kind of were talking about some stuff. And one day I said, I can't wait to go play my favorite golf course, which was Secession Golf Club in Beaufort, South Carolina. And he goes, hey, I'm going to be there. So that led to us hooking up on the porch, having a drink and talking. And we were just kind of sharing some stories. And I told him, I said, well, I just got the Sam Putt Lab. And he goes, well, you know who you got to talk to? And I'm like, well, no, who do you talk to? And I've heard podcasts from you and some other people. And back when I was growing up, I know it's weird to say that I've only been doing this for 7 years, but when I was growing up in the golf business and the teaching side of it, you always went to find people. John Tattersall said that in their last podcast, that's just what you did. The internet, the YouTube, that sensation was just kind of booming. But he goes, you need to go talk to Jason Sutton. And I'm like, well, who's Jason Sutton? So he goes, well, Google it. So I'm like, okay. The answer to everything.
Right. So I Googled you and I'm like, okay. And I remember calling you and I remember having a 25-minute conversation. And you said to me, I can hear the passion in your voice. I want you to come to Carmel Country Club. And so I booked a trip and I went with my wife. And I remember walking into the dojo and just kind of sitting there going, okay, how's this going to work? And I was there for probably 15 minutes. And you said, okay, I want to know what you know. Give my son a lesson. And for the other two people that are listening, your son is a very good player. And I go, I don't even know how to turn this machine on. And he goes, okay. You're like, all right, now I know what you know. Let's get going. And I remember before I left, we were sitting on the opposite side of your facility. And you said, okay, how can I help you grow? And that was the second time in my career where someone has taken the time to go, how can I make you better? And I just asked questions and we just had a conversation and go, okay, what do I do? And you said, you got to learn and you have to read. And that's the second person that told me how to read more. And you just have to be able to listen. And I think that's the one thing that you're only getting. When I was in this, you always kind of learn one way. It's like, okay, this is what the golf swing is, but there's multiple ways of doing it. And then going through 2 mentors and then going to the PGA show with you. And I remember going to the Tweet Up and you introduced me to Corey Lundberg. And you said, this guy's an up and comer. You have to pay attention to what this guy does. And he put out something about a mentor tree.
Yeah. Curious coaches.
Yep. Curious coaches and, learning in the mentor trees and how much faster these mentors will help you get to where you need to go. And so Gail's on there and then you're on there. And then I started reaching out. I met Dennis Sales. First time at the PGA show, going to the open forum. And so he's become a junior mentor of mine. And the list can go forever. My wife is a mentor of mine. My wife is, she's now a vice principal at a high school, but she was in special ed for 19 years and learning how to deal with kids on a different level. And I have a couple kids that have learning disabilities and how to reach them at a different level. So it's not just necessarily golf, it's outside of golf as well. And I think that's one of the things that is a lost thing because people always look, in my opinion, like, well, I got to figure out this golf thing, but there's more to it than just that. And
right.
You have people that are outside the golf realm can actually help you more inside the golf realm because you have to talk to people every day. And I think that's a really lost part of it. So I still have voicemails on my phone from you and Gail going, that's it. You got it. Keep going. So those mean a lot to me because of the fact that, when I first kind of got into it, you're always searching like, okay, who's out there? Who's doing the best? And I always fought to be on the curve and now you're on a curve and now you're just kind of trying to stay ahead of the curve.
Yeah. The more you achieve, the more you want to learn, I think, and not so much to validate, but more just to say, what's next? It's a continuous learning process.
I think
the EQ is I think as important as the IQ, as we say.
Yeah. I think that's the biggest thing because when I first started taking lessons, it was, you have to throw up so much information at people to show them that you know what you're talking about. I just had lunch with a friend of mine and I just said when I was getting the golf business, I always felt that people didn't come to me because they didn't know what I was talking about. So then I started to try to sell them on my information. Like, I do know what I'm talking about. Listen to me. I have all this knowledge. Like, this is really great. And then you get to a point where they're coming to you for a reason. They want to get better. So they know that you have the knowledge. It's a lost art. And I've learned this from my 2 top mentor trees, you and Miss Gail, that it's okay to be quiet.
Right. They don't charge you for the words.
No,
they charge you for the results and the experience.
Exactly right. So it's okay. And that's taken me a long time because the fact that you, like you said, you to validate what you say, but they're there for a reason. So I think that's an important lesson that I learned later in my career. I wish I would have learned that, right away, but I don't think it would have led me to the people that were put in my life for a reason. So,
yeah, I think looking back, even at my career, it's like you don't know what you don't know, and that's nobody starts out at anything being good at it,
Right.
And when young coaches come to watch experienced coaches and they look from a different lens and they say that looks really easy, it's not. It's making the right decisions and saying the right things and imparting information at the right time is something you gain through experience.
Oh, very much so. I mean, and I think that's why the constant search of information it's golf information, but I think it's more communicative information. The EQ, the learning how to communicate effectively to your students to go, okay, can you do this? And how to do that. I think like I said, that's something that feel that I search out more now than just the golf knowledge.
100%. Yeah, that's awesome advice. And so let's kind of stay on that topic. And if you had to give a passionate PGM student or a young coach advice on, I'd say anything, but obviously due to teaching, what would that be? And then second part to that question would be, what should they ignore?
I think the first thing that I would say to a PGM student is be humble. There are a lot of, through my mentor tree, have gotten really good exposures to some of the top teachers in the nation. And not one of them thinks that they're that good. They know they're good, but they talk to you like you're a normal human being. So I think in being humble and listening to people, because they want you to do better than what they went through. Gail did a presentation for the LPGA Coaching and Teaching Summit about leapfrogging. I want you to get better faster, and this is how you can do it. So be humble and listen. And then I think the one thing that I would steer them away from is getting too much knowledge where they feel that they lose their art. Because there's a lot of information out there. Some people think it's good. Some people think it's bad. Everything has value to it, but I think that you have to be able to put that value onto what you're doing.
That's really good.
And being okay to go, that might work for this person. It's not going to work for this person, so I'm okay with it. And then being able to not put that onto a student, even though you want to sound smart. So
that's really good advice, I think.
Yeah. So, but that's also coming through experience too, you know? So,
right. Yeah. You wouldn't have that. That's my point, is you don't have that answer when you're younger because you just don't know.
Right.
And it's the ability to be patient, but given that look at that time, and things have changed a lot now than when me and you were in our 20s. The information is there and available to them, via the internet or whatnot, a lot quicker than when we had it.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that's the part of the two, as far as learning how to use that information. The internet it's like you said, Google it. If you don't know, Google it. Yeah. I've been very fortunate because, like I said before, as far as I'm at a position now where I can call you, I can call Gail, I can call these people to go, hey, I have this person. What do you think? I'm not the smartest person in the room, and I'm not egotistical enough to go, I don't know everything. I know everything. So there's something to be said about calling somebody and saying, hey, what do you think? Because you're only helping your students. Obviously you're helping yourself with the knowledge, but you're also, one, I get to talk to you because I know how busy you are, but also being able to kind of research and have that knowledge base.
Yeah, that's really good. So let's sort of piggyback on that a little bit, and then we'll switch gears into some personal development stuff. But what are some, let's say, bad recommendations or information that you hear in our industry? And then let's sort of talk about, how do you feel about the state of the teaching business as it is right now?
Oh, wow. I think the first part of the question, as far as what's out there now, quite honestly, I think golf coverage is ruining the game of golf, in the sense that they're giving their personal things on what is happening in the golf swing. And we honestly don't know. We don't know what they're thinking. We don't know what they're doing. But they're trying to help the average player try to do some stuff. And then that average player comes to me and says, oh, I'm trying to keep my left arm straight. well, why are you trying to keep my left arm straight? Well, I read it in the golf magazine, or I read it in this, they said that on TV that you have to keep your left arm straight. And I'm like, okay, but maybe that person's left arm was so full that that's just something that that student or that teacher gave them to try to do. So I think that the information that's out there is kind of watered down a little bit, but you don't really know the backstory behind it.
Yeah, so I agree with that. I mean, I think there's a lot there's misinformation, I think, that's being given, and it's amazing how it's just what's good for us as teachers a lot of times, having that information available to us, because we can discern pretty quickly what's good and what's inaccurate. But the students they don't have a very good filter, and it ruins them, and it makes our job harder.
Right. And I also think that they try to do something that their bodies really can't do. Everybody's different. So then they try to do something and then they hurt themselves, or they can't physically do it. And then they're so lost in their ways that they go down a dark rabbit hole and they can't get out. So, and then what was the second part of it again?
What's the state of, the state of our teaching business, and how can we improve it?
I think the state of our teaching, the really good teachers are doing a really good job. I think that they're learning more about their students, and they're being connected with the students, that they're helping them on another level. I think the one thing that I think the one lost art that kind of is part of it is that in order to get better, you need to be in constant search of information, good information and bad information. We need in search of information, but having people that can help you along the way. You don't have to do this alone. I think that's what people think when they get in there, like, I'm going to do this on my own. It's going to be like this. But if you look at any top teacher, they always had somebody behind them. They always had a mentor. They always had someone pushing them to do something different. And you don't have to be alone. And I think that can hurt us in the long run, because of the fact that maybe it's ego. I don't know, but I just think that's going to hurt us a lot if we keep thinking that we have to do this on our own.
Yeah, I think, there's always the best the young guys, and I've got two working for me, Seth and Roby, that are not afraid to ask questions and aren't afraid to fail. And I think that's the advice that I give the young coaches out there is get in there, and we're all going to screw up. And it's just a matter of sort of stepping back, recognizing your failures, and then don't make the same mistake twice, or try not to. So you start to see that's the experience thing, obviously, but it's just paying attention. But like I said, don't be afraid to ask somebody. That's what I tell my guys. I'm like, save the video, give me the information, and we'll look at it together, and we're both going to get better. And having somebody that's willing to sort of take that burden off of you, I think frees you up to not be afraid, because you can't teach if you're kind of looking over your shoulder and worrying about making mistakes, because you're going to do it. Right.
And I think that's part of too what you said as far as failure. I think that's another thing that our students are afraid to do. They're afraid to fail. And because they see that these guys and girls on TV, they hit it where they want to, and they're so good. And you look at this past tournament, the players, like how low that some of these players go. And I kind of have a thing that when my students come in, don't be afraid of failure. It's going to happen. You might top it, but as long as you give them the encouragement to go, listen, you could do this and it's okay. I think that softens them up enough to go, oh, I can do this. It's no different than having the freedom or the ability to send you a video to go, what do you think?
Right.
I don't want to fail, so I'm going to ask for help.
Yeah, that's fantastic. That's a great segue into my next question is, we look at these top coaches and high performers like yourself, and you think, oh, it's been such an upward climb, a smooth ride to the top. But we all know we have bumps in the road. So describe a failure that has set you up for later success. And do you have a favorite failure you could share with us? Doesn't have to be golf either.
Wow. Favorite failure. Okay. So when I was kind of looking at getting into the kind of teaching part of it, coming from the background that I came in, and Mike and Charlie and their success, is that you kind of have this one viewpoint of what the golf swing should look like, because that's not optimal. There's multiple ways of doing it, but you just see this one way of doing it, and that's the way I knew. That's the only way I knew, and that's fine because of the fact that was just kind of getting started. And I remember going to Cascade Hills, and I remember working with somebody, and I'm like, man, it was so easier with this. And I remember kind of talking with Gail at that point, and I remember like, I was just kind of frustrated and I was upset, and I called her up, and she says, man, I hear that you're really frustrated. And I go, man, it can't be that hard. And she goes, maybe it's you. And I go, what? No, I know exactly what I'm talking about. She goes, are you sure? And I go, I think so. And I go, well, what do you mean? She goes, you ever heard of the saying, there's multiple ways of skinning a cat? I'm like, yeah. She goes, maybe it's you. And I go, well, what do you mean? She goes, I think that what you have is good, but I also think that what you need is more. And I'm like, what do you need? What do you mean? She goes, you need more information, but you also need how to communicate that information.
More tools for the toolbox.
More tools for the toolbox. And I'm like, and at that point, I was so frustrated because it's not what I wanted to hear. I wanted to hear, no, Brandon, you're really good at what you're doing. Keep going. But that's not what she's meant for.
Well, that's not what good mentors do, right? Sometimes their tough love has to be brought into it.
Yeah, and you and I mean, we've had multiple conversations of tough love, and it's not what you want to hear, but it's what you're meant to hear. And that was, for me, was a big failure. And the second one was where I went to TPI for the first time. A doctor friend of mine invited me to go. He paid for my trip. We went down to Boston. I saw Dr. Greg Rose sitting on the stage, and he goes, I can tell you. And I looked at my doctor, and I go, no, the arms are supposed to go first. This is but again, it's what I know. And he goes, just listen. And I'm like, really? Come on. And I just, in my head, I'm like, this is a waste of time. And I remember sitting there mesmerized by what Dr. Greg Rose and Dave Phillips were saying. And I'm like, there's no way you can predict that. And then it opened up my eyes to go, well, everybody's different. So, and at that point right there, I developed my teaching philosophy. It's just, my teaching philosophy is everybody's different because everybody is different. And how am I going to help that person in front of me today? And you don't want to hear it when you don't want to hear it, but you need to hear it when you need to hear it. And those people are put in your lives for a reason. And so those two situations basically led me to let my guard down, just kind of open up my heart and my ears. I was given 2 ears and one mouth, so I might as well speak twice as less as what I hear, right? So
right.
Those two instances helped me kind of gather and be who I kind of am today.
That's really good. Thanks for sharing that. Those aren't easy questions to say that you've failed, but I mean, it all makes us really who we are today. And the older you get, the more you're able to share those, because you've heard mine.
But I'm more comfortable in my skin to share those now. Before, it was like, I don't want to admit that I failed my students. I don't want to admit that I failed my mentors, but it's not failing my mentors. It's the tough love, and it's the conversation. It's no different than when you have kids. Like, you're talking to them because you want them to go through the pathways, but you just want them to get less injured. And so those kind of things that when we talk about, it's like, I'm okay in my skin now, but it's taken me a long time to get there.
100%. All right. So here's a tough one for you. And you mentioned reading and books, and how many books I've read over the years, because I'm a little older than you are. I think it was more forced because the internet wasn't what it is today. But what book or books have you recommended to other people, and what books have sort of influenced your life or your career? Give me some book recommendations.
The one book that I first read was by a friend of mine, a mutual friend of ours, Jason Gus, was The Outliers, and about kind of that 10,000 hour rule and how much hard work and perseverance it takes to kind of make your craft.
Like Gladwell?
Yeah, I don't think I'm ever going to get to my 10. I think it's going to be well over 10,000 hours by the time I'm, 75 and sitting in my chair type of thing. But that was a kind of one that kind of sparked my interest in kind of doing some more reading. Another one that I picked up, I'm kind of an old school guy. So some of the old school by Adams and Golf My Way, things like that. But another good one that was given to me by Dennis Sales was 8 Traits of Champion Golfers. Kind of learning how people kind of think a little bit differently. And
it's a really good one.
It is. So, but other than that, for me, quite honestly, I'm kind of a hands-on guy. So I like listening to podcasts, but through like your mentorship and everything like that, I'm more into podcasts now because I have time to listen to those on my way. So anything by Dr. McCabe, Gary Vaynerchuk, just some of those other things out there that, people will say, hey, this is a good one. But those are some of my go-to ones that I go to a lot to just kind of listen to and, see what information's out there.
Very good. All right. So if you had to get one message to the world via television, internet, or let's say a metaphorical billboard, what would it say, or what would you put on it?
Wow. What would I put on it? I guess the biggest thing that I would say is that failure is okay, and don't be afraid. Golf is a really hard game. Life is a hard game. And we have lots of failures in our lives, and it's okay to try. I think that's what hinders a lot of us to do what we need to do to get ahead, is that we're afraid to fail. And I think with the people that are surrounding you, that it's going to be okay. So if you want to suck less at golf, I think it's okay to fail, because it's going to happen. So
suck less, that'd be a good one.
So suck less. So, even when my juniors come in, we, hashtag, put some on it. We, suck less, and how are we going to do that? We're going to have ups and downs. So, I think it's okay to fail and suck less.
That's awesome. All right. So couple more just rapid fire up. I really appreciate your time and being here. I know you're busy, but when you feel overwhelmed or unfocused, what do you do, or what do you tell yourself? This is, I think, something that all busy coaches deal with, and I'm always curious to hear this answer.
That's a really good question. Quite honestly, I do two things. One, I go on a date night with my wife. It's just kind of an opportunity for us to kind of just reconnect and just kind of talk about stuff, because being a sounding board to some things, that's important to me. And quite honestly, the other thing is I call out of my friends that are part of my tree. It's no different than the conversation you and I had earlier today. It's just, these are some things that I'm going through. This is some things that I'm feeling, because I know you've been part of it, and I know that you're there to help me. And, life lessons, you've probably had some similar situations. So being able to do that's been some of the things that I kind of go to. So.
Very good. Yeah, your wife Julie is so good at that. And I know we've had a lot of conversations when we've had dinner together, and she's such a good listener, and she gives really good advice. I think she would have been a great teacher if she wanted to be.
Oh yeah,
for sure.
So we kind of share similar stories as far as like, you will not believe what this kid did today, and I'm like, did he do this? And she goes, how'd you know? And I'm like, because I would have done the same thing. And she goes, that's why you were so naughty in school sometimes. But it's being able to have those conversations. So we spend as much time as we can to that. And then, I have 3 boys, so they keep us busy with our stuff too. So that's kind of some things that we do.
That's really good. So last question, and then I'll give you a chance to give some parting words. Is in the last 5 years, what habit or behavior has improved your life the most? Pretty deep one.
What was that?
In the last 5 years, what habit or behavior has improved your life the most?
What habit or behavior has improved my life the most? Habit or behavior.
Is there some? Let me lead you in another direction. Is there? I'm always very curious about like morning rituals. Is there anything like in the morning that you do to sort of get ready for your day, or something that you to kind of get you going?
A couple of things. One, even though it can be kind of taxing sometimes because people with young kids can kind of feel this, is that I take my kids to school every day. So it just gives me an opportunity to just kind of listen to them, and we kind of listen to the radio. And then also I'm kind of the husband of the year at my wife's local school because I bring her a coffee every day as well.
Oh, that's nice.
Because that's just, because with our busy lives and our schedule, we don't, it's the two ships crossing, type of thing. So it gives us an opportunity to just kind of say, hey, how you doing? Just kind of capping the day as far as what we have to do. So those are some things that I do every day. Rain or shine, no matter if it's like this morning, it was raining here. And so I walked in with a cup of coffee and said, here you go. And on our way. So, and then every Monday I go out to lunch with the gentleman that got me into this golf business. So he's been kind of a brother to me and an older brother. And so we go out and just kind of catch up for the week and talk about stuff and be able to kind of just, share some things with him has been really good.
That's awesome. So, I mean, I can't tell you how proud I am of watching you grow as a person and a professional. And for me to have just a small part in that has been very fulfilling. And I really value our friendship and our relationship that we have. How can people reach out and say thank you to Brandon? Give me your handle and your platforms and your social media.
Right now, you can find me on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram at Brandon Roby Golf. Right now, I'm working on my website at BrandonRobyGolf.com, so it's kind of a work in process. So, but those are the ways that I'm. From my mentorship, I'm starting to use Snapchat a little bit more, not as much as what I know I should, but I'm using it more and more. So, so those are three ways to get a hold of me. But I can't thank you enough for everything that you have done for me. I hope that through this podcast, and I think people can grasp the fact that you mean the world to me as far as what you've been able to do. Not only to me, but I think to a lot of other golf professionals out there. You got two of the best in Seth and Robbie, and they're very fortunate to have a person that's willing to take time out of their day to help them get better, because those guys are rock stars. And I think that's what, honestly, a lot of top teachers have, is that trait to take those golfers, those teachers from the beginning to superstardom. And that's, I can't thank you enough for being part of that. You're a bigger part than what you say, but I can't thank you enough.
It's my pleasure, and I appreciate you taking the time to do this show. We'll hook up all those the books and all the references that you had in the show notes at the end of the podcast. And anything that I haven't asked you, or any topics that you want to discuss before we part?
I think you asked me a lot harder questions than what I thought you were going to ask me. I thought you were going to throw me some softballs, but no, not at all. I think this was a lot of fun, and I thank you for letting me be part of your early success in this podcast. I think it's going to be well perceived throughout your days, but it's been awesome.
All right, my man. Thank you so much. And like I said, reach out to Brandon. Give us your biggest take from this podcast would be helpful. and throw me a review, which would be awesome too, because I'm trying to get better at this. But Brandon, thanks so much for coming on the show, and I will talk to you soon, my friend.
My pleasure. Thanks, Jason. Appreciate it.
Hey guys, this is the Guru again. Just a couple of things before you take off. Number one, big thank you to Brandon Roby for coming on the show and sharing with us his story. Don't be afraid to reach out to Brandon on Twitter or Instagram at Brandon Roby Golf. Throw him a shout out, give him a follow. This guy is brilliant, and you're going to be hearing big things coming from Brandon here in the near future. Also, please share the podcast. Reach out to myself. You can find me on Instagram or Twitter at Golf Guru TV, at Golf Guru TV if you want to say hello or give me a shout out, or if you have any questions, which brings me to number 2, which is send me your questions via email at golfgurushow@gmail.com. I'm doing the Guru Friday, hashtag Guru Friday. If those of you that caught the last week's podcast, I had some good questions. So looking for more questions or just anything that you want to share, whether it's your story or anything you want me to cover in a podcast. This show was produced and edited by Brian Stringfield, and I'm your host, the Guru, Jason Sutton. Don't forget to throw me an iTunes review and a rating, as that will help more people like yourself find this show. And please share it. Share it on Twitter, share it on Instagram, share it with your friends, share it with somebody you think will be helped by this information, as we have a lot more coming down the pipe. I've got tons more guests scheduled, and might be you. So we'll see what happens. So as I always say, study, practice, teach, and pass it on. We'll talk to you next time. Thanks for listening.